the World Report, your compass to news around Africa and the world beyond. I'm Fatia Mohammed Noor. In the headlines, United Nations Environmental Assembly begins in Nairobi. West African bloc lifts sanctions on junta-led Niger. Nigerian government union workers launch strike over inflation. Chad set for first elections since end of civilian rule. And Russia orders halt on petrol exports. Welcome to the program. Now, the sixth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 6, begins in Nairobi with more than 7,000 delegates from 182 countries taking part in the sessions. The Assembly meets every 2 years to set priorities for global environmental policies and develop international law. I'll be diving a bit deeper on what this Assembly means to you a bit later on in the program. Leaders of the Economic Community of West Africa have now said they would lift strict sanctions on 3 countries.
Closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger to be lifted.
Nigeria's government and union workers have started a new nationwide strike that threatens to shut down key services in the country. People are angry about soaring inflation and growing economic pain in the country. Since assuming office, President Bola Tinubu has enacted policies that include doing away with fuel subsidies and unifying the country's multiple exchange rates, leading to a devaluation of the naira against the dollar. To Chad now, where the country is set to have its first presidential election since the end of the civilian rule. According to Chad's election agency, confirmed dates for presidential elections are set, committing to hold 2 rounds over May and June with provisional results due on July 7 and a promised transition back to democracy from junta rule. Russia has passed a 6-month ban on petrol exports amid rising local demand. A similar ban last year was introduced to avert shortages and spiking prices on the domestic market. The export halt is set to help create space for the maintenance and repair of refineries, some of which have suffered attacks in recent months amid the war in Ukraine. Russia produced 43.9 million tons of petrol in 2023, of which it exported about 5.76 million tons. The biggest importers of Russian petrol are mainly African countries, including Nigeria, Libya and Tunisia, as well as the United Arab Emirates. On the big story, we focus on the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is the highest level decision-making body when it comes to environmental matters in the United Nations. Well, how did it come about? In 2012, UNEA was founded to deal with 3 major planetary crises: climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste management. It serves as a platform for setting global environmental policies, promoting international cooperation, and coordinating the implementation of environmental initiatives.
The theme for UNEA 6 pertains to a multilateral approach to the triple planetary challenges surrounding climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And so, since it's multilateral, we came up with the idea of bringing locals to bring people to the table, because chairs and locals and seats bring people to the table. And so we created a maze out of them, because a multilateral approach is challenging and people need to find their way. And so when we bring people to the table and they find their way to the center of the table, they can get to discuss solutions and ideas about addressing these challenges that we face around climate issues.
UNEA operates through resolutions and decisions adopted by its member states. These decisions are aimed at addressing pressing environmental issues. Each session of UNEA typically focuses on a specific theme or set of issues relevant to global environment governance.
Today, in 2024, the international community is looking to us to deliver. This is our moment to advance the global environmental agenda.
I sat down with Hao Liang Zhu, the Associate Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, on the importance of UNEA. Can you provide an overview of UNDP's roles and contributions to the United Nations Environment Assembly?
Thank you very much, really, for this opportunity. UNDP has been a long-standing partner of UNEP, for many, many years. And in our role, compared to UNEP, is very different, in the sense that UNEP is a norm-setting organization, right, in the UN on anything environment, and the UNEA is the largest gathering of governments on environmental issues globally, whereas the UNDP is a field-based organization helping our country governments to get things done, right? So there's an important complementarity between what UNEP is about and what UNDP is about, and we are really here to understand the discussions that are really have important implications on environmental issues globally, and then understand the priorities and make better connections between the global priorities, the decisions of governments, and what we do at country level day in and day out.
What are the most pressing environmental issues that UNDP, or rather UNEA, should prioritize, and how is UNDP working to address them?
As you know, the narrative for global environmental challenges, that has been used very widely is this triple, crisis, right? Climate, biodiversity loss, and also pollution, right? So this has really been the sort of organizing framework for the UNEA, and a lot of discussions around this. And there are a set of international conventions, right, agreements that address this, sort of a triple crisis, right? Environmental crisis. You have a climate, convention. You have a biodiversity convention. You have now a global biodiversity framework, right? You also have a desertification, anti-desertification convention, right? You also have the plastics conventions negotiation that is taking place, right? So all these issues, will be discussed at the UNEA. So the issues related to, for example, circular economy, right? Related to, for example, pollution, ocean management, plastics, a lot of issues around this triple crisis will all be the focus of this UNEA. And for UNDP, as I mentioned earlier, right? We are part of the UN system, right? And our value added, I think, is really to work with our governments to, get the international commitments, right, met, right, and through our collaboration at country office level. And give you a couple of examples. For example, when it comes to climate action, right, which is a major focus, of UNEA, and there's also the UNFCCC, right, International Convention, right, and the governments need to implement. What is the core issue today? The core issue is that we needed to achieve a 1.5 degree world, right? The temperature increase from industrial period cannot exceed 1.5 degrees. What is the instrument? It is the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the UNFCCC, right? And the key instrument here is the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, right? During the initial phase of the NDC, when the Paris Agreement was agreed, the collective contributions, commitments of governments, allowed us to see a 3.5 degree world. That is, if everybody does what they promised, right? Yeah. The world will still see a 3.5 degree temperature increase, which is obviously not sustainable. So during the COP26, the Glasgow COP, when the second generation of NDC was submitted, right? And then the collective commitments will result in a 2.5 degree world. So it's a major progress, but it's still not enough, right? And 2024, 2025 is a time when countries will prepare the third generation of NDCs. And this time we must achieve a 1.5 degree world, right? So the discussion at the UNEA will clearly provide the momentum, right, for countries to achieve that goal. Now, UNDP's role is to work with governments. We are working with more than 120 countries, 70% of developing countries, right, to support their work to have a new generations of NDC that will help us to achieve 1.5 degrees. So this is what we do on climate. I can also give you an example on biodiversity if we have time later. So,
you can give me an example.
on biodiversity, climate, desertification, right? And also issues of pollution, circular economy, they're all linked, right? These are linked. So we need to use, these conventions to have an integrated approach to achieve our goal of, dealing with the triple, climate, biodiversity loss, and the pollution crisis, right? For biodiversity, what do we do? The issue is that people normally, until now, don't value nature when they make investment decisions, right? When they set up a factory, right? They cut the trees, they introduce the pollution through water, chemicals, and air pollution, for example, right? So what we needed to do is really a few shifts, right? So that we can actually deal with the loss of biodiversity, but really also use our biodiversity resources for nature positive growth, right? Because you still have to grow, right? And you have to have jobs, right? You have the economic prosperity. What do? We needed to have a value shift to understand the nature differently, that nature has a value. Right? We needed to attach a value to it when we make investment decisions, right? So it's a value shift. And we have, again, a lot of work to do, right? To have systems of valuing nature, right? The second shift is our economic systems, right? And we needed to, for example, promote circular economy. We cannot just produce, use, and throw away, for example. We needed to reduce waste, right? And really reduce the throw away culture, right? And to create a circular economy so that we reuse, right, these materials. And there are a lot of details, right? But the key message is that we needed to have economic systems, right? Shift, right? So we move towards more circularity. And the other is our practice shift, right? Every day what we do, right? For example, when we talk about circular economy, right? That have impact on nature, plastics comes in, right? We must reduce or eliminate unnecessary single-use plastics, for example, right? And we must really seriously reduce food waste, because there's a lot of waste in how we consume our products, right? So we talk about the value shift, the economic system shift, and also practice shift, so that we can actually reduce the biodiversity loss, right, and achieve the goals of biodiversity that is called for in the convention and also the global biodiversity framework. Right? There are a lot of things we can do. Right? So this is a crucial moment, and UNEA is an opportunity for multilateralism to prevail, so that not only we have a country-level actions, but we have regional collaboration, also global collaboration, to achieve a sustainable world for us and for our future generations. One issue is financing, let's say financing, okay, because many developing countries face fiscal challenges, right? Because many developing countries are heavily indebted, right? I came from Ethiopia before this trip. Their public debt level is already 50%. Kenya, for example, my understanding is that the public debt level has exceeded 75%, right? It's a very high level of debt. And that squeezes public budgetary space, right, to invest in human development, in sustainable development, right? You have a situation where, okay, the Minister of Environment, right, or Minister of Economy to say, okay, I need a certain budget, right, to reduce air pollution, to, encourage nature, investment in nature, right? But the finance minister is saying, okay, sorry, you cannot do it. I need this money to repay, for debt repayment, for interest payments, right? Education ministry, health ministry have the same problem. I have a problem I want to implement to improve people's health, right? Impact of climate on health. But the finance minister may say, okay, sorry, I want to support you, but I have an international obligation for debt repayment, for example. The issues of financing is an everyday challenge for a lot of developing countries. So what can we do, right, to address this through multilateral collaboration, right? Again, there are a lot of details, we don't have time, but this is one area of challenge, right? But the other one, for example, is technology, right? Technology. There are technologies that have been developed, right, in advanced economies, for example, right, to deal with a lot of challenges. For example, renewable energy, right, solutions, right? But many developing countries have challenges to access this technology, right? In Africa, for example, right, the majority of the world's population who do not have access to energy, clean energy, right, is in Africa, right? The technology is there, but they don't have the ability to access it, right? So that is partly linked to financing. It is also partly linked to the availability of existing technologies, right, to this population. So how do we overcome this, right? There are a lot of good practices, collaborations, but it's probably not at the scale that is necessary, right? And then the last question I wanted to mention is capacity. Capacity. We need indigenous capacity, right, to make use of this technology, but also maintain the technology, right? And create applications, and so that you can take advantage of for example, electricity, for health and for education outcomes, right? So there are a lot of challenges, but again, the way to solve this problem is really effective collaboration, right, and solidarity-based support.
This year, UNEA focuses on how countries can use multilateral environment agreements to tackle the triple planetary crisis around the world. On Election Pulse this week, we focus on South Africa. The Southern African nation will be heading to its national and provincial election on 29th of May. Now, this election will be quite interesting as President Ramaphosa's party, that is the African National Congress, who is facing a big challenge this time around to retain its parliamentary majority. This will be the 7th democratic election since the end of the apartheid system in 1994, marking 30 years of freedom and democracy. President Ramaphosa is seeking a second term despite the challenges ANC is currently facing, with its popularity gradually dropping to below 50%. The main opposition parties are the Democratic Alliance DA and the Economic Freedom Fighters EFF. Former President Jacob Zuma has backed the newly formed Umkhonto weSizwe, or Spear of the Nation party, a move many say may attract some traditional ANC voters. The election system in South Africa is quite different compared to many African states. The country has 14 political parties currently represented in parliament and more than 300 parties nationwide. Voters choose political parties and not candidates in national elections. Parties then get seats in parliament according to their share of the vote, and lawmakers elect the president. South Africa has been facing record power cuts, poor service delivery, and high levels of unemployment.
Political parties are out in the streets trying to fix the roads, trying to give water to the people, and trying to fix the mess that South Africans are finding themselves in. But those South Africans are asking, is this enough? They are asking the pertinent question of why are we only getting service delivery now that it's election, that it's the election year? Why couldn't this be done prior the elections? But also the other thing that South Africans are struggling with is the fact that the economy is on a slippery slope. And whether the government can get us out of this mess, I don't know whether people are going to trust the current political party that is steering the ship here in South Africa, which is the ANC, to ask voters to trust them once again. We'll see. But many South Africans believe that this year's election is going to be very important because many South Africans believe that it can be a coalition government, and we need to see how that is going to work.
On the entertainment scene this week, the world is mourning the death of Peter Anthony Morgan, the lead singer for popular reggae band Morgan Heritage. Peter formed Morgan Heritage with his siblings in 1994, and the band won a Grammy for Best Reggae Album in 2016 for Strictly Roots. This week on Parting Clips, we take a look at Africa's largest mosque in Algeria that has officially been inaugurated ahead of the holy month of Ramadan. It is known locally as Jama El Jazair and can accommodate 120,000 people coming third after Islam's holiest cities in Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. On that note, we wrap up the World Report this week. Remember, if you have any comments or queries, you can reach me at Noor Fatia on all social media platforms. Thank you for watching.